This is episode 19 with author, speaker, and voice for diversity in the workplace, Dr. Avis Jones-DeWeever. Hello, and welcome to the episode of the UV Effect podcast. Thank you again for joining me. I appreciate you being here, and I am excited once again for another guest that we have on the show. And this woman that we have on the show is a phenomenal leader, and she is teaching other women how to do and be just that. Dr. Avis is a woman that I have known for a while now. I don't remember when I met her, but I do remember that I've known her for a long time, and I follow her on Instagram, and I follow her on Facebook, and I follow her all the time, and I see what she does, and she is incredible with her message. What her message is all about is two things, really. She focuses on women and leadership, and she focuses on diversity in workplace. So diversity is as pertains to women and African American women. And both of these topics, women leadership and diversity, are so crucial in our society. I think personally, it's just my belief. I think we need more of both, especially women diversity and women leadership. I think it's incredible, and I think it's so necessary. And in this interview, we really delve deep into why it's something that we don't see, or, why it's something that the society is struggling with, implementing into the world, and we talk about what the struggle is there, why those problems exist. We talk about how to solve those problems, why it's important for these women, for African American women, for women in general to be leaders, to be in these positions, what qualities they have that qualify them to be in the forefront, why they are so important to our society. We really delved deep. I really enjoyed this conversation, really because it talks about things that I've loved to talk about with my family, things that hit home for me. We talk about, biases. We talk about some of the covert and overt biases that women face when going into the workplace, specifically talking about African American women and some of those biases that they face when going into the workplace, and how we can kind of, as African American women, how if you're African American women listening, can divert those biases yourself. How can you make those non-existent? What can you do to affect a change, on the people's minds of how they perceive African American women? It's a fantastic conversation. We delve deep, and I'm talking about deep. We go back, talking about generations and generations. We talk about the history of African American women. We talk about the history of women and how those things affect what we, how we are being treated today, why we are being treated the way we are today, and how that really does stem from our roots from the past. It's a deep conversation. I love it. I think maybe it's not for the faintest of heart, but I think if you want to learn more, if you want to just really be educated and also empowered on this type of topic, keep listening, because I promise you that will be the outcome. It was really incredible for me to listen, and you will hear in this interview how many times I said, whoa, oh my gosh, yes. I really enjoyed speaking with her, because there's just certain people, you can really talk to, and like you guys, you just kind of mesh and you understand, what those problems are, and you're just really passionate about kind of solving those things. And she's definitely one of those people. And if you are someone that's passionate about this, you need someone to talk to about this. You need to hear this from somebody. You need to hear solutions from somebody. She's got that down, locked, and covered. She's an author of her book, How Exceptional Women Lead. She also started a company or organization called Exceptional Leadership Institute for Women, ELI. And again, both of those are really all about getting women in power, getting them to learn, how to lead and be a part of, and to really dictate how people treat us, to kind of destroy those stereotypes, push aside those ideas, and be strong, confident women and strong, confident Black women, and just be in charge and not be afraid to be in charge. Very powerful, very exciting for you guys to hear. One of the ones I've been really excited for you guys to listen to because I really enjoyed just being there interviewing her myself. So definitely, once again, as I always say, notepad, pencil, get those out and get ready to take some notes and just ready to listen in and take in what Miss Dr. Avis has to share with you all today. So, without further ado, let us jump in. See you there.
Welcome, Dr. Avis. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
I am really happy for you to be here. I'm excited to talk about what we're going to be discussing today. You are I would say, an influencer. You're an activist. You are a voice for this particular topic, which is something that I believe really needs to be talked about. And I'm so happy that we have, the strong African-American woman such as yourself to share this message with the world as you have. And you're not doing it lightly. You are coming in strong, and it's so empowering and so inspiring. So so let's leave behind all the buildup and let's get into the actual questions. So the first thing I really want to talk about is how you found this world of wanting to speak about, diversity and wanting to include, African-American women, African-Americans in general, and in the workforce, in society in of itself. Where did you find this inspiration to be a part of this other than being an African-American woman yourself?
Yeah. Hi. Well, first of all, I am so super excited to be on your show. And you give me a great deal of inspiration because I look at you and I see the best of what Black women and developing Black women have to offer the world. So super excited to be here. In terms of my inspiration, I would have to say this is something that I've been passionate about ever since I was a kid. I cannot remember when I did not have a very strong sense of social justice, specifically related to both race and gender. And I think it has a lot to do with my family. My family growing up, they used to tell us a whole lot of stories about their childhood, and they would share with us what growing up was like for them. And I'm from the South, and my parents had me when they were a little bit older. To tell you the truth, they had the experience of having to navigate society literally within the Jim Crow South, which a lot of us think was a whole long time ago, but it wasn't really that long ago.
Right.
And in fact, my father was the child of sharecroppers. Another thing that we all like to think would happen forever ago, but he actually lived that experience as a child. And so having to, grown up with that experience and hearing from them what they did and how they had to be very intentional with navigating their lives in those circumstances, but still being very successful, each of them with what they ultimately ended up doing in their career, was very inspirational to me. And so it made me want to both fight on behalf of injustice in terms of fighting to overcome it, but it also made me very specific about understanding that it is possible to face injustices and still push through them and be successful anyway. Right. And so what I do today, I believe, kind of merges both of those ideals.
I mean, definitely. You are very outspoken when it comes to Facebook, and of course being a speaker and being a coach, all these different things that you do, and you go on these panels and you go to these events and these conferences and you hold your own events and things like that. You are a leader in this field and in this focus of bringing diversity and allowing people to be enlightened and bringing awareness to people of things that they didn't know, of things that they thought were so long ago, but really are still intact today, which we wish could really kind of break down. We want to break down those barriers, and you're really helping people to do that now and bringing awareness in those areas. Now, but for those who aren't as woke to the issues that diverse members of society, when it comes to African Americans, when it comes to women, who are as woke to the issues that they are facing when it comes to the work field, when it comes to society, what are those issues? What are the things that are holding us back? And also, what do you do, as this influencer, as this coach, as this speaker, to, bring awareness, to bring change?
Absolutely. Great question. So some really amazing statistics. First of all, there have been a lot of studies that have been done of employees in the workplace. And some of those studies do break down by race and gender, so we see how different people feel about things differently. And what's been very interesting to see is that when you look at the results of that research, you find that Black women really are the most ambitious demographic group of people in America, period. They are more likely, of course, right? They are more likely than any other demographic group to say that they want that next promotion. They are more likely than any other women specifically to say that they want a role in terms of executive leadership. So they don't really come into the workforce with low aspirations. They come in with big aspirations. In addition to that, we are more likely than any other women in America to be a member of the labor force. So we have the highest labor force participation of any women. Quite frankly, have had that ever since they started that statistic, and clearly, given our history, have always worked in this country. So I would say that it's just a factual thing to say that we really didn't need a women's movement to be infused into America's labor force. We've always been here, and we're very committed to it. I think largely because we understand how important that is for our families. Our earning power is central and very important for our families to be able to flourish. It's important for our families, for our communities, really for us to have stability. And so we're very committed to the workforce. Unfortunately, what happens is that once we get in the workforce, we find it very difficult to be able to match our opportunities with our aspirations. So what happens to us is that we hit, I would say it's much more stringent than a glass ceiling. I would say it's more like a concrete ceiling. It's very difficult for us to be able to get the same opportunities to get promotions that are in line with our experiences, with our abilities, and with our ambitions. So much so that, generally speaking, about 22% of Black women want to ascend to executive leadership. But at the end of the day, only about less than 2%, about 1.5% of us are actually able to get there. Contrast that with the fact that if we look, for example, at white women's aspirations, only about 2% of them come into the workforce with the aspiration of ascending to executive leadership, but about 22% of them get there. So there's something that's very specific that's going on with Black women that is not opening up opportunities. And so what I do is I work on what I see to be the two sides of that equation that's really blocking and getting in our way. On the one hand, I think that there are some very serious and severe institutional challenges with the way that businesses do business, right? And with the way that they really don't maximize the human capital that they have, so that they're opening up opportunities for all of those who have the ability and the ambitions to get there, not just Black women, but all of us. So there's some disparities there. And so in order to address that issue, I work with a lot of corporations around diversity training and consulting so that they can get a better understanding, first of all, about why it's good for their business to make sure that they maximize the human capital, all of the human capital that they have in front of them in terms of their employees. But I also give them strategies and systems that can help them be able to open up opportunities to people in a more fair and equitable way. Then on the other side of the coin, I work with Black women and other women of color specifically around helping to develop strategies that can help them maximize their career outcomes. So that means things like helping them understand how to develop a career plan, helping them understand how to grow their network, which is critically important. And I think that's one of the main areas that oftentimes holds us back as well. We don't seem to have as broad a network as other people. Really helping Black women specifically understand how to communicate powerfully in a way that demands respect, but also in a way that doesn't allow us to unfortunately get pigeonholed into the stereotype of being quote unquote an angry Black women. So there are several things that I work with Black women on that they can do on their side to maximize their chances, but I don't sort of operate within this mythology that it's all our onus. I think there are some systemic challenges that need to be addressed as well. And so that's why I work with not only individuals through coaching, but also with companies through consulting, so I can get at sort of, as I see it, the 360-degree problem that we're facing.
Yeah, I completely agree. I like something that you said there, talking about how companies don't maximize, what was it that you said? You said that
their human capital.
Their human capital. They don't maximize their human capital, and I completely agree with that. And especially looking at, African American standpoint, like you said, you shared the statistics of saying that African American women are the ones that are they're the ones that are the one that they're pushing. They have the most aspirations. That they are the ones that want to be in the workforce and want to do the most in the workforce. And even those two things, seeing how they're so disconnected is very upsetting, because if these companies were able to really maximize the strength and the confidence and the urge that African American women have to be in business or to be in companies and to be in the workforce, then I feel like then a lot of companies would actually thrive even more and wouldn't have as many of those issues that they do face at this point in time. Something else that you actually touched on as well was saying that there are some other issues that are not really on us, that it's not really our fault, of course, when it comes to the I would say biases that you're facing in work field and really in society in of itself. And that's actually something I'd like to discuss now. I did a talk a little while ago about the overt and covert biases that African American women, and actually it wasn't just African American, but that diverse women, so Hispanic, Asian, all these different diverse people in America, the biases that they face when in business. I also talked about like being an African American female myself, that when we see these biases, and because they're so strong, because they're so, I guess, pungent in society, we then began to kind of take them on as our own and believe as if it's real, and because it continues, almost passes down generation to generation, and as we go into different, we might even have confidence when we go into a field of business. We might have confidence when we go into work, but then when we're surrounded by these biases, when we're surrounded by rejection, we then start to believe that these biases, that these ideals are true. So I want to know what kind of covert and overt, and by that, for my audience, I mean covert as in the ones that are more hidden, the things that are as seen, and then the overt, the ones that are the biases that are that people are more aware of, that we see more often. What are the kind of covert and overt biases have you recognized when it comes to women, African American women, diverse women in society, in workforces, and what kind of effects do you see on their self-esteem, on their confidence, on their work ethic?
Absolutely. I'm going to just go back to the example that I gave previously about being pigeonholed into this stereotype of being perceived as an angry Black woman. So I teach on this specifically, but also broadly, I teach on something around unconscious and unconscious bias, which to me is like similar to what you're saying here. And it's two sort of things that are going on here with that. On the one hand, unconscious bias is a very real thing. And basically what that refers to is the fact that as human beings, quite frankly, our brains aren't able to process all the information that it gets logically, instantaneously. In fact, we get about 11 million bits of information every minute that our brains have to process with all the stimulus that's around us every moment, right? But it only can process logically about 60 bits of information every minute. Okay. So that means, the vast majority of all the information that is coming at us every single moment, our brain is basically relying on our subconscious mind to sort of process that information. It just goes in, goes out, and we're not really thinking through logically every bit of information. And, it would be physically impossible for us to do that because there's so much going on. There's everything you're seeing, everything you're touching, everything you're smelling, so much going on, right? It makes sense. The problem is that when you live within a society that is replete of various stereotypes, that a lot of times that subconscious processing attaches to stereotypical assumptions rather than reality. So how that impacts Black women specifically as it relates to that particular example, but there are a lot of examples, is that if you're in a workplace, and let's just be very real, unfortunately, we still live in a very segregated society, right? Most people live in neighborhoods that are very much homogeneous. Most people who live with them, around them, look very much like them. Most people go to schools that are still very much homogeneous, right? And so for a lot of people, by the time they grow up and they get into the workplace, a lot of the other people, particularly I would say specifically for white people who are the majority in this country right now, but will not always be. We can talk about that later. They are, for the first time in their lives, having to work with people who are not like them. And they might not have had that experience in school to a great degree or in their home environments growing up. And so if they are now interacting with people who they only know through stereotypical assumptions or through a culture that really plays on those stereotypes through popular media, then they are attaching what they believe Black women to be based on a caricature and not on lived experiences. And the way this is particularly devastating specifically for Black women is, there's a lot of, for example, Real Housewives shows and things like that, reality TV, that basically show one type of very, very stereotypical type of Black woman, quite frankly, who are nothing like any real life Black women that I've never ever known. And I'm almost like half a century old. and I've never, had a drink thrown in my face. But, if you watch these shows, you would think that's something that Black women always do. Exactly. So you have these things that people, see in popular culture. And they bring those perceptions with them into the workplace, such that now when they are faced with a real life Black woman who is professional, who needs to meet deadlines just like everybody else, who has certain standards, who may be passionate about a particular subject, her passion, her directness might be then interpreted as anger, because it is misinterpreted based on these stereotypes. And of course, those types of realities can be attached to all sorts of different people based on all sorts of different stereotypes. It might be a different stereotype for different types of folks. But that's a challenge that we face. And that sort of thing can hold you back, because then you get this bad reputation that people don't want to work with you, that people are overly sensitive, and it makes it very hard to gel on a work team. So those are some of the things that I work with women around communicating better, but I also work with companies around recognizing that unconscious bias exists and help them with some sort of cultural competence techniques so that they don't unfairly apply these stereotypes to people who they have to work with every day.
I really, there's a point that you talked about where you talked about how white people are now kind of having to work harder at this point in time in order to, I guess, keep up, so to speak, because at this point, like you were saying, how when African American women are working and in their jobs, they're working and they're pushing and they're making sure they're getting their voices heard, and also looking at how, because they think that it's they're just being angry or they're just being pushy or whatever it is, for them it's this. What I've talked about with with my parents, and I've talked about this kind of issue that we're facing, is for them it seems more like this kind of fear, so to speak. Of almost this fear, so to speak, of them rising up. And now I put the air quotes there only because I feel like it's already been what our personalities have been. African American women are strong. And we push and we work, and I feel like we've always really been that way, but we are now finally kind of being seen and really being able to have our voices heard and really being able to be visualized in society without as much pushback. But as you also said, we still are in this segregated society still. So we still do have those issues of the pushback. And so from what you said, looking at from what you said and looking at those biases that people have and what they see when they look at African American women, I feel like it's just this kind of tug of war, so to speak, of beliefs. Like it's like we want to keep remembering them this way, but now we're trying to kind of change that picture. We're kind of become this other person, but then sometimes it kind of changes around, it switches around and you kind of want to continue to believe that, and it's kind of, it gets confusing, it gets muffled and blurry. And I think at this point, I think it's kind of our jobs, so to speak, to put a staple in on how we want to be seen. Put it on the board, write it down in permanent marker that this is who we want to be and this is who we want to be seen as. And I feel like that's one of the only ways that we're kind of work on getting rid of those covert and those overt biases, and then also to be able to get rid of those biases within ourselves. Too. Can you talk a little bit more about? You were talking a bit about, if I can recall, because I don't want to mess up exactly what you said, but you were talking about how when African American women are working in their jobs, and I guess trying not to be that angry Black woman, so to speak. Why do you think that it's harder for us African American women to actually break free that mold? Not so much to for people on the outside to not see us that way anymore, but also to not be that, you know? Because I know we still have that issue in society where even though many African American women aren't that way, there are still some that struggle and still are that way. So how can we begin to how can we begin to kind of be the people that we need to be in order to change the views of society, if that makes sense?
Yeah, good question. So, when I talk with people about this and I teach on this, the first thing I like to sort of lay out as a marker is that we are human beings.
Yeah.
And every human being has a right to the full range of emotions, including anger. And there are times when anger is appropriate, okay? So I don't want us to ever think that we should try to cut that off of who we are because, that is part of the human experience. However, you are exactly right in that sometimes because we know that this stereotype exists, we sort of hold ourselves back in the workplace unnecessarily because we don't want to play into that stereotype. So we diminish ourselves to a greater degree, quite frankly, than we should be. And in the process, we almost make ourselves kind of semi-invisible. And in order for you to be able to sort of ascend up the ladder, people need to know who you are. You need to be able to make a stake in your company. You need to be able to be a go-getter and to produce. And it's hard to do that if you're somewhere hidden in the background because you don't want to be misperceived as angry. Okay. So it's sort of, it's understanding how to balance that. I mean, part of what I teach and part of what I talk about actually in my book is this thing of, we've always been told, and you've probably been told this too, given all that you've done, but we've always been told, at least I was growing up in my age, that we have to be at least twice as good. And so, that's something that most Black people hear, that you have to be at least twice as good to go half as far. So it's not uncommon that when we get into the workplace, we over-deliver. The challenge is that oftentimes we will put in the work, we will over-deliver, but if that work isn't attached to us, we don't get the benefits from the labor that we put in. So what I work with people around is understanding how to not only over-deliver, but also self-promote, how to make sure that you are attached with the work that you do. And you can't do that if you're somewhere in the corner, not really letting people know that you exist because you're diminished or you're afraid that they might think that you are overbearing, that you are somehow pushy, that you are angry. You have to and this is, in a way, this is also a challenge, quite frankly, that all women face. Some of these stereotypes in terms of, if a woman is called pushy, a man might be called assertive for the very, very same behavior. So these are some of the challenges just that we face in the workplace, period, as women. And then there are some very particular ones that Black women face. But it's all about, like you mentioned, owning who you are, being confident in who you are. What I found is that if you present yourself with a level of self-respect, then that is something that emanates out. And other people, the right people, will get that and they will treat you with that respect. But if you present yourself as some diminished person, then oftentimes other people will see that too. And they will, sort of ignore you or diminish you or take advantage of you. So you have to sort of balance this thing of, being confident, being strong, and doing it in a way that you can be proud of who you are. But also understanding that there are some specific communication skills that you can utilize to help sort of not unnecessarily play into those stereotypes that we all know exist.
Right. So you have been talking about some of the things that you do teach and the things that you do you talk on and that you help women work with. You have the program or the institute called the Exceptional Leaders Institute for Women, and where you do discuss a lot of these things, and then you do provide the talks, you provide coaching, you provide education on these topics so that you can help women through this. Can you tell us about the Exceptional Leaders Institute for Women? What inspired you to start this institute? And I'm sure you shared quite a bit of it, some of the little bits here and there, but I want to know kind of, what the inspiration was behind it, and really what your envision, what you envision for this institute, what you hope to see, what kind of change you hope to see.
Absolutely. So, I started this institute actually about a year after I started my first business, which was a consulting firm. And I loved being in business so much. And I had such a sort of long and kind of interesting and very diverse career where I ultimately ended as being a nonprofit executive. I decided that one of the things that I wanted to do when I came up with the idea of developing, the Exceptional Leadership Institute for Women, was that I wanted to create a vehicle where other women could learn how to sort of maximize their career success, navigate the challenges that I mentioned, but also, if they wanted to, also understand how to make a safe and profitable transition from employee to entrepreneur. So I focus on sort of both sides of that coin through my institute. And one of the things that sort of really helped me as I was putting that together was between the time that I, started my other business and started this institute, I went through this process of interviewing around 70 different extremely successful Black women in various leadership positions across the country. So these women were very successful either in corporate America and nonprofit America as business owners themselves or as politicians. And I used that information for my book. But part of what I also, a lot of the lessons that I learned from that, I also have applied in the programs that I utilize and in the courses that I've developed, which I teach women through my Exceptional Leadership Institute for Women. So it's a combination of not only sort of my learned experience, but what I've found have been sort of strategies of success that dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of other very successful Black women have been able to implement to be able to successfully navigate the challenges of race and gender at work, and also in terms of getting their businesses up and out and being very successful in the world.
Can you tell us about your book? Can you tell us about, the book is called How Exceptional Black Women Lead. Can you tell us about, the book? Actually, let us know what it is about, what you discuss in this book, and then also, what kind of change have you seen from the moment that you wrote this book, that you collaborated with these women to have this book produced? What kind of change, like individual change, have you seen in women that have read this book?
Yeah. Oh man. It was such a labor of love. This book. I decided to write it for a couple of different reasons. Number one, we know now about the story of Hidden Figures, and that movie was so inspiring to us. But throughout my career, I had gotten to know personally a number of Black women who I felt were doing amazing things in a lot of different arenas that I believe that not many people knew about them. And so on the one hand, I wanted to write a book that would allow me the opportunity to showcase some incredibly amazing, just truly exceptional Black women, not only in the U.S., but some around the world. But in addition to that, I also wanted to provide somewhat of a blueprint for the next generation of Black women, because I believe that there really is no reason why each generation needs to start from ground zero. I think that what really needs to happen is that we transfer knowledge from one generation to the next so that the next generation can stand and start out a little bit further along the path than we started out along our paths. And that's how you have sort of collective progress throughout the centuries, right? And so really what the overarching and biggest goal of this book was to be able to sort of condense the wisdom of all of these women into this one book, such that younger women coming behind us wouldn't have to make some of the same mistakes that we made, and might be able to get further and faster than we did on their way to success. And I tell you, I've had some really just wonderful feedback from women who have read the book. One woman in particular sent me a picture of her little girl who was maybe like 8 or 9 reading the book. And she's like, I want her to read this right now. And I was just so super excited about that. So every time someone tweets me or sends me a picture of them reading the book, or just write something about how much it has impacted them, it makes me super excited. And so actually I'm doing something special for Black Women's Equal Pay Day this year. That's basically refers to the day that is how much further into the new year that the typical Black woman has to make to be on par with what a white male earned by the end of the previous year. So for Black women this year, it falls on July 31st. So we've had to work over 6 months more to make what our white male counterpart made in 1 year. So, but I'm going to have a new sort of thing because this book has been really great. I've sold, thousands of copies. It's done really well. But I want to have a special sort of book giveaway for Black Women's Equal Pay Day so that more women can get access to this book. So stay tuned. I have some stuff coming down the pipe that will have like a free book plus shipping offer so that more people can sort of get the information that they need in order to really maximize their success.
That's so great. We'll definitely have links to your website and your book and what's happening with, the exciting giveaway that you're going to be doing. All the information will be down below, so you can check that out. I really love what the concept really was, behind the book. I love that it was about kind of providing this collective information from generations past for this, current generation, because we need that. And I did this interview with his name is Kevin Knevel, and he was saying that a fish doesn't need to be reminded that it's a fish. But when it comes to people, we often need to be kind of reminded of who we are, what we are capable of.
Yes.
And so what your book really does, it doesn't just remind, but it also kind of influences change, which I think, and this positive change of who we can be. So not just, who we are right now, but what we can be because of our past and because of what African American women are and what we do and what we are made of, and being able to be aware of that and seeing that, by the stories of other African American women that have gone through things and have learned, and we be able to do the same thing for that. I think it's just needed. We just constantly need that because we go through so much. I mean, just like this society is just very difficult for African American women. African American women. I think there is a change happening for millennials and going up, but some change is positive, some change is negative, just like most change. And we just kind of need that. We need to try as hard as we can to keep the balance going so that we can get a bit more of that positive change happening because it just keeps going back and forth. But that's why I really enjoy the topic of your book there. So something else I wanted to talk about was how I believe, being an African American myself and looking at social media, looking at media, looking at, even history, I find that African Americans just have such strength, right? They have so much endurance. They have, I believe it is because of our past that we are able to rise up and do what we've done when it comes to society. And I feel like African Americans they do really lead a lot of the industries. They really do when it comes to creativity, when it comes to athleticism, when it comes to just thinking like Michael Jordan, or you thinking about Oprah Winfrey. These people, they lead these industries. They are successful beyond imagination.
Right.
And I look at that and I just like, wow, that's so empowering, that's so inspiring for African Americans. But then I also look and I see how also because of our past and because of our history, we as African Americans tend to limit ourselves because we may not believe that we are as capable because it's kind of been taught through history that we aren't, we're not as good as, or we're not as impressive as, or we're not supposed to be doing this because. So I want to know, based on what you have seen through your work, based on what you've seen throughout your years, not because now you look really young. You said how you said you were like what? You said like
I am almost half a century. I have a birthday coming up next month. I'll be 49.
You said I can't. No, I can't. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I disagree. But saying that, I would love to hear what kind of unique value. What kind of unique attributes you've seen African Americans contribute to society, and why? Because this is really, it seems like a fight for you. This seems like something that's of course it's something very important to you. Why is it important that these things that we become more confident in these attributes, and why is it so important that we begin to, or that we continue to keep them in rotation of society, keep them influencing society?
Absolutely. So, wow, that's such a powerful question. one of the last lines in my book is, it says, "I want you to remember that you are exceptional." And I think that is so important because we are exceptional, but so many of us have forgotten that. And as you mentioned, when you look at our history, it is absolutely incredible. The resilience, the strength, the creativity, the power. This nation specifically, for example, would not be what it is were it not for us. And I find that when I travel internationally, I don't care where it is. It could be in Europe. It could be on the continent, in Africa. It could be in South America, where even in the South Pacific. Wherever I've traveled internationally, and I have seen representations of American culture, it has been specifically of African American culture. So I don't even think we even get how much we are revered, how much our contributions are revered around the world. We don't even get it, especially if we never get out of this country. We don't get how influential we are to the world. And so just understanding that, number one, is important. Then when you think about what our contributions to this country has made in terms of not only sort of just physically building this country and the economy of this country, but when you think about making this country a little bit closer, forcing this country to be a little bit closer to what it proclaimed to be in its constitution, right? If it were not, for example, for the civil rights movement, and even before that, I mean, if it were not for all of these sort of liberation movements that really African Americans have been at the forefront of in this country, then we would not have a nation that expanded rights, not only just in terms of civil rights per se, specifically related to the African American experience, but we were in the forefront, which caused this country to push and expand opportunities for women, generally speaking. We were in the forefront that pushed this country into expanding opportunities for the LGBTQ community. We were in the forefront for this country to be able to expand opportunities for people with disabilities. We were in the forefront for this country to expand opportunities for people of other ethnicities and races who face discrimination. It's only through, for example, the 1964 Civil Rights Act that all of these other sort of expansions of rights happened. Yeah. It was because of our blood and our determination that really opened up this country to a level of fairness that had not experienced. And we did not just hoard that fairness for ourselves. It's something that really most people in this country benefit from. The vast majority of people benefit from. And so what we have done, quite frankly, is revolutionary in this country. We have done something that most countries have not experienced through our work. Is we really provided, for the most part, well, I can't really say a bloodless revolution because many, as you know, throughout our history, many of our heroes have been killed. Right. But we did not take up arms against this country, but we changed this country mightily. Yeah. And it's a change, quite frankly. I don't know if you realize this, but I took part in this program. As I mentioned, sometimes I gone to other countries, teaching brought in by U.S. embassies to teach in those countries. And that was a part of a program that the State Department ran under President Obama. But they also have a sort of the reverse version of that program where they would bring in people from other countries to the U.S. to learn from people in the U.S. around different things. And part of what they would do sometimes is they would bring in people from other countries who were in countries that they were experiencing oppression. And they would bring these people to the U.S. to meet with African American leaders to learn how to make change in their countries, because we understand how to create change, how to create social change. So I don't think people even understand how powerful we are and what an impact that we made, not just in this country, but we have influenced and inspired people all over this world. When I was in Colombia, I met with Martin Luther King Jr. scholars in Colombia, South America. Wow. We are an inspiration and a model of excellence, of change making and justice on the world stage. And so when I say you need to remember that you are exceptional, I really mean that.
Right.
We are exceptional. And we need to claim that and never forget it.
That is so powerful. It's, I mean, I feel like something that we know, but like don't really know, like in the sense of being the people that made change, right? We were brought to this country to be leaders, really. I mean, that's what I look at, because I am a Christian. I look at paths. I look at what when you're born, like what you're supposed to be doing, what your mission is. And when I think about the unbearable pain and struggle that we went through for hundreds of years, I look at it as that being our path. That was our reason. We were supposed to be brought here to be leaders, to change something that we didn't know was supposed to be changed quite yet. And we've created, like you said, we wouldn't be the nation that we are without our sacrifice, without slavery, without what we as African Americans did. And it's not just about the slavery; it's about that change that we did provide. That that I love you said that that we inspire other nations, we inspire other countries, and so I think that if just one African American person, if an African American person can look at that grand scale change and just take out a percentage of that confidence, of that ability, and put them and realize that it's in themselves, that could really change their perspectives and allow them to kind of shut off all of those other ideas that America, the American ideals kind of try and place on us as diverse members of society. And I just appreciate you saying that, because I think that it's something that maybe we didn't know at all, like we didn't realize at all, or we just, for my listeners here, because I know I have majority African American listeners, so either they didn't know this at all, or they just really needed this reminder. And we did. I think I needed that reminder. I would love, I really appreciated that. I think it really hit me, because I was just like, that is so powerful and so powerfully true. I just love that. That is incredible. To think of it in that way, to think of that kind of power that we had, that we really changed America and changed it for the better, but yet we are still held at this lower regard. And that should be really the driving force to keep us keep reminding ourselves, like you said, that we are exceptional and that we need to keep pushing to remind other people that we are exceptional. And that's that. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of like, oh, that was good. That was so good. That was so good.
It's so true, though, and part of the problem is, and you're right, that a lot of us don't know, because this is not what you'll be taught in school.
No.
Let's just put that out there. You will not read this in your history book in school.
No.
And in fact, there have been examples of, school districts that have gone out of their way to really be very egregious in terms of their rewrite of history, actually causing some texts to not even refer, quote unquote, to the slave trade, but instead referring to Africans as, immigrants to this country, as if it was a choice, and so, this requires some of your individual and independent learning to really learn your history as African Americans. And I also think, quite frankly, as African American parents, it is our responsibility to make sure that our children's understanding of their history is not limited to what they get taught in school, because the problem is, if it's limited to that, they will first of all, they will not understand their greatness in terms of our impact on history. They will not know that we actually really were the ones who created mathematics, for example, and science, and that Kemet, Egyptians didn't look like Elizabeth Taylor, for example. So we have to take, we have extra responsibility to teach our children who they really are. And when you grow up knowing that, when you grow up really knowing your history, knowing what you were faced, knowing what you were up against, and that you not only faced it, but you conquered it, then you will understand that it will be impossible for someone to diminish you.
Wow.
When you know yourself that well and that profoundly, and you know what you have faced and pushed through, and you're still here, what could anyone say to you to make you think anything less of yourself? Absolutely nothing. So it is our responsibility as parents to make children. I see it as, it's like an armor. It's like we need to, it's like putting on armor. You know, I'm visualizing a knight and an armor, right?
Yeah.
We need to teach our children so that they have this armor on them every day. So that when they go out into society and they face something that is, you know, potentially racist or just plain ignorant, or they get, or a teacher says something that they know is incorrect, okay, that they don't consume that they know that that's not true. And it's an armor and it's a shield and it protects them and it allows them to sort of grow up knowing that they are exceptional. And it's something that I think is an absolutely essential thing for our children, especially to have, because it is, if we are not equipped in that way, it is easy in this society to begin to believe that you are less than.
Yeah.
It's easy. It is everywhere throughout popular culture. And as you mentioned, this belief that you're limited to only excel in one or two specific areas. You know, it's easy to buy into that nonsense unless you know that it was a Black man who performed the first successful open heart surgery in America. You know, unless you know those things about us, you know, it's very hard to navigate this society in the full breadth of who you are and knowing who you are. And to me, there's nothing more powerful than fully knowing who you are.
That's the epitome of what the UV effect is all about. And you bring this, and I could really talk to you for so much longer, but I will end it here, but I will probably be having you back on because this was just one of my favorite conversations that I've had so far on the podcast. I really appreciated this conversation. I really appreciated you being on here and then being very candid and open about it, because that's something that we need so that we are not so...
Gabrielle, I want to say one thing, Gabrielle.
Yes.
Because this is specifically about Black girls, because I think Black girls specifically need to hear this. Did you know that Black girls, if you look at premature infants, Black girls have the highest likelihood of living than any other premature infant?
Really?
Yes. So if you look at even the smallest Black girls who weigh only about the how much it feels to like hold a quart of milk. That's just how much they weigh. Black girls that small are over twice as likely to live as white boys the same age when they're born. And so I want to bring that up because I think it's important to know that there's something special about the strength of Black girls. We are more likely than anyone else to live, even when we're born into this world under the most dangerous and difficult circumstances. So we are born with a certain strength that no one can quite explain. So whenever you're faced with a challenge, remember who you are, remember that you were born with that strength, and remember that you're exceptional. And you are a great example of the exceptional Black young woman. So I'm super proud to be on the show. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you once again for joining me for another episode of the UV Effect podcast. If you enjoyed this interview as much as I did, please, if you're listening to this on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitchers, subscribe and leave a comment letting me know how much you enjoyed it. You can also head over to GabrielleJordanInspires.com/019. That's GabrielleJordanInspires.com/019 to check out all of Dr. Avis's links to her website, her social media, her book. All of that will be on her page, as well as leave a comment there if you really enjoyed the interview. Also, go ahead and head over to Instagram to follow us at the UV Effect and check out our posts, the quotes from this interview that I really enjoyed, as well as just fun clips and snips that we sometimes post over there. And yeah, thanks again for joining me. I hope that you enjoyed and that you will join me next week. See you then.